computer. So I'd just like to welcome our speaker this evening, Bob Heil, Dr. Bob Heil, K9 Echo India Delta, I think I've got it correct.
That's me.
Who very graciously agreed to talk to us about the Pineboard transmitter build that was, I think it was based through QST and other bits, but I've seen bits of it online, and I thought it'd be great if we could get Bob himself to come and talk to some of us about it. So without further ado, over to you, Bob, and you should be able to share anything you like.
Okie dokie. You might have to, I do all my slides from here, so you might want to do a full screen there. So I don't share my screen. You'll have to click up and make my picture bigger, because we're going to have some diagrams and stuff, and so you'll want to see that full screen. Well, I appreciate you having me. I really love to visit, especially with all of our friends in your country, and it's just so much going on. But we want to talk about AM, don't we? Yes, it's one of my favorite modes. That's all I do, really, a little bit of sideband here and there, but it's really something that really keeps me going. Every morning at 9 o'clock Central Time, we have a net of about 3 states across the middle of the U.S., Illinois, Missouri, all into Kansas, and so on. There's usually 15, sometimes 18, sometimes 10, whatever, and we're all on AM. And we're getting more because a lot of new guys have a 7300. And you would think, oh, yeah, one of those rice boxes. Yes, but let me tell you, they really sound good with the proper microphone on them. They really, really sound good. Well, here a couple of years back, one of the engineers, he's a retired engineer, a TV engineer, he builds a lot of stuff, just fun little things. And Richard came up with, it was only 1 or 2 watts. And he would have it on the net, bring it on. And we were amazed how much and how many could hear him, because it was 1 watt. And so we started the peanut whistle net. And every first Monday, we see who can run the less power. And we don't want anybody, or like to have anybody that not running over 5 watts. And it's totally amazing what happens to that. You would think, well, can you hear them a couple of states away?
So,
get him going here. Come on here, buddy.
Dad, I'm copying everyone 2.5. So
That's 1 watt from 120 miles from me. And it's so invigorating that we get to hear those kind of signals. And what the hell? I thought I had more than that. There's got to be more.
okay, nothing heard. Anybody else hear someone I might have missed? Go ahead. Let me see. Oh yeah, I just want to double check one thing here, and then we'll get going. Okay, but Dad, I'm copying everyone 2.5. So
He's 100 miles from me, and the rig that you were listening to is right there. And he's a good guy, and so we started in building things. He and I, just going crazy. And so the next thing you know, I started building. He builds everything on pine board. He really, really loves to do that. So we started building pine board. And little did I know where this was all going, but it kept going pretty crazily. It ended up, we built the power supply. We built the 12AX7 mic preamp and dual band equalizer. I'm an absolute freak about equalization. We all need equalization. And just, I learned that years back from
Well, anyway.
some of the Bell Lab scientists, projects and so on. Equalization is very important, especially on AM, because a lot of AM signals, they kind of sound like this, you know, like what happened? Well, what happens is that you lost your articulation. So I want to bring this back again. And all of a sudden, I become very articulate and easier to understand. And so anything that I do has to have at least 2 bands, 3 bands of equalization. And so does the pine board. And the final is 5 watts, 6AG7, 6V6. And so we started in talking about it on the air. And then I was on Ham Nation at that time. And I drew the first diagram and it was terrible. And a guy came to me and he was a retired graphic artist at General Motors. And he said, I think I can help you with your diagrams, because I mean, they were terrible. I'm awful about that. And so WD4IQN, Gene, came up with this amazing graphic. You don't even need a schematic. What happens is we start off with the board. And once you get that all laid out, then put the parts in and away you go. And the next thing you know, you will have a working power supply. We did 2 of them, your choice. We did one with a 5U4 glass rectifier, and then we did another one with solid state. And you got a lot more voltage out of that one, but it still worked equally well as far as the transmitter, just had a little more voltage. There's the layout that Gene did. Aren't they wonderful? As I said, you don't need a read schematic. And the preamp was really a lot of fun. 12AX7, of course, and with the high and the low. The low filter is at 160 hertz. The top one's at that magic 2.5K. That is where all the magic happens in audio communications, because without it, this is what you have. And it's very hard to understand that F and an S, are they the same, a P and a B? Whereas if I bring the 2.5 back up, wow, that's amazing. And so when we're running low power, we want to get all of that speech articulation possible. And there's the layout for the 12AX7. And I also went a little further for some that wanted, me being one of them. I don't use anything except balance line microphones. And there's many reasons, but the main thing is it deters a lot of any kind of RFI on a high impedance line. So I use a little transformer. Our company, we have that. They're hard to find, but Heil Sound has them. And it's 50K or so on one side, high Z, and it's 600 on the other side. And that really worked great. And the layout for it, we started with that. And once you get it all kind of laid out, now, how do you get to the bottom of the tube socket? Well, you don't. What you do is you turn the tube socket upside down and you wire all the components like you see here, all like little spiders. Then once you get all those together, of course, paying attention to what comes off of each pin, once you have that, you turn it back upside down and you need some little spacers. If you can't find them, just one guy he did his spacers with it was a kind of a strong plastic little tube that he had. And one was a straw. And so whatever, we're hams, we make it happen. And so you can take that socket, turn it upside down, drop a spacer in it, and that's what you're ending up with. And that just was so much fun to design and make right. All the parts lists are there. And the pine board transmitter was another situation of what we were going to do, but I used what Dick had, what we heard a while ago. Just start out with the pine board, mount things and so on, and away you went. There's what we needed to do for the sockets, make those all prepared and bolt it together. And there you are. That transformer you see, that's the modulation transformer. And it just is fascinating to have it work so well. And I had a little problem. What do you do with the switch? Turn things on and off? Well, that was pretty simple once I sit down and thought about it. Same with the coax connector. How do you mount that on a pine board? Well, you take a piece about, number 16 or 18 copper wire, and you make a little like a frame for it. You bolt it on there. Same thing with the switch, no problem. And bingo, that's how you mount a coax connector on a piece of pine board. You just have to think a little bit. Well, I got to thinking about things, and it's kind of crazy when I start thinking, right? I said, you know what? I bet this thing would work on 160 meters. Now, I'll back up a little bit. All of these parts, that's a big question we got. In fact, I got slammed quite a bit. We can't get those parts. Well, yes, you can. You go to a company called Antique Electric Supply. They have all of them. They have them in a kit form. You go to antiqueelectricsupply.com and you have a pine board power supply. You have a pine board equalizer, preamp, and you have a pine board final. They have all those parts, but there's a couple they don't have. One of them, and it's really hard to find these days, is the 2.5 millihenry choke. Hammond made them for years. They quit building them. So now what you got to do? You go to MFJ. Martin Jew will sell you anything. And there you go. What do you do for the coil? It's like Antique Electric Supply doesn't have one. So what do you do for that coil? That coil that you're looking at, that's, by the way, is the original one that ended up on the cover of QST. That coil that's about half of it that you buy from them. It's the coil from their 811 transmitter, and they'll sell it to you. Well, I cut it in half on that one, but I got to thinking one day, you know what? We could use that whole coil and do a switch, and we could do this in 3 bands, 160, 75, and 40. Wow, that's very interesting. And where I came up with that idea was in the beginning of all of this, when we were building the final. What we had to do was we had to short out the coils, and here's what we did. We shorted out half of that coil just about. For 40 meters, we only needed the left side of it. And I'm thinking, why can't we do that with a switch? Of course we can. That's what they do when we have our transmitters and do a band switch. And so I did. And we now have a pine board that is good on 40, 75, and 160. And it's very simple. And so we use the whole coil, and you can see the couple of taps there, a little bit hard to see. There's a red one, a green one, and then the end on the white. And that really works great. And I did a band switch, a 3-position band switch. And, you know, with the pine board, we don't have any front panels. Well, I made one out of a piece of 1/8" plywood. I also mounted a relay, an antenna relay, and activated that so that we could have our receive in it. Well, this thing got a lot of play in the very beginning because of Ham Nation, but the at the time the CEO of the ARRL called me, and he's an old broadcast engineer, and he loved this. He said, "This is a great product. We need to have this as a do-it-yourself project in the magazine." And so they did. And there it was on the front cover of QST for January. Was it January? I think it was. Wait a minute. I got it right here. Duh. It's January of 2018. That's where this went back to. And so now things really got cranking. It got the cover award, and we're very, very excited. So a lot of people started building then, and they still are. And the only problem was they called from the lab at the ARRL and said, yeah, we really like all these drawings and stuff in your pictures, but we can't print it. I said, why? Well, it has to be certified. I said, certified for what? A third order. I said, you mean to tell me that every project that I see in QST has to be certified FCC? Yes, sir. Well, that's a lie. I know that fact. And I was pretty miffed about that. So I said, well, I can't ship it to you. They wanted me to ship it to them. No, I didn't build this to bounce around in the back of a UPS truck. So what do? I have a friend on the Peanut Whistle Net with us. He's a retired engineer from the Army. He was a certification engineer. And he certified all their transmitters, receiver, tests, all that. And I said, he only lived about 25 miles from me. And I told him that, you just bring it over. I got equipment. And so I took it over to Ed, and this is what we did. Wow. Well, they only wanted minus 35 dB on all of their transmitters. We're talking about all the commercial transmitters, ICOM, Kenwood, all of them. Well, look at that. Both of us, we just, no, we got to do this again. It was down 40 dB, the third order. Like, what in the world is going on here? I have no idea what happened, but it happened. And we had so many people coming to me wanting to build it because of that. But there's the key right there. Antique Electric Supply, tubesandmore.com. They have anything, guitars and radio receivers, transmitters. If you've never been there, you're looking for a knob for an old radio, Antique Electric Supply. It's an amazing place. But I started getting a lot of guys sending me their pine board project up in that left. Look at that. Now that guy is a very experienced builder, but he wanted to build it. The lower left picture is the bottom. He used a Toyoid and it worked great. I talked to him at least a couple times a month on it. He's down in North Carolina. And the top right was another fellow that built pretty much what we did. The one on the bottom was cool. He's from Wisconsin. He built it in 3 tiers. He didn't have the room on his bench, so he built it vertically. And then my good friend K9EID, look what he did. Oh, I mean, there were some guys really doing some great work. There's our wonderful friend Gene. He did all of those graphics. This was at I think it was Huntsville, maybe 2020. I met him finally, but we were all so thrilled about this because everybody was building. My QRP days go back a lot longer. I was a technician for 17 years, started in 1956. And in those years, 6 meters was open all the time. It was the biggest sunspot cycle. Some of you probably were on there with me because I did work a lot of Europeans, England, Ireland, all that. It was wonderful. Well, I was off the air. I got back in, it would have been 1966. I got into building musical things, sound systems and so on. We opened a music shop and so on in Southern Illinois. It became the rock and roll capital of America. Everybody from the Grateful Dead to the Who, Peter Frampton, all these guys would come there, and I would build their sound systems and take them on the road. We were the premier sound company. And I think we might have talked to you about it. If not, I can come back and get you some real history about that. But anyway, we had a lot of fun in those days. But I was off the air all those years. And when I came back on, I couldn't believe it because signals were really, really bad. So I got an extra class license, and that's how I got into all this stuff. Well, shortly after that, guys started bringing me their CB radios because I lived in a small town. Everybody knew who we were and what we did. And they'd bring these CB radios to me. I didn't want to hear about that, but they had something that was broken. I could fix it. And so I'd fix it for them. I didn't get on or anything. But I'm going, you know what? If I changed a crystal, retuned a couple of coils, and so I did. A high gain 5 was the big dog. There it is. But I did more. I found out at the time that high gain was going out of business that made the board. High gain, very popular in the CB days. And I called the company and I talked to the owner. And I said, is it true that you're going to be closing? Yeah. I said, do you have any parts? Well, I do. He said, I have boards. I have thousands of boards. They're built, they're tested, they're aligned. They just have places for the wires coming out. No chassis, nothing, just the board. I bought all of them. I bought a semi-truck full of them. And we started building all of these things in our plant. The demodulator board, the little switchboard. We got a switch from him, but he didn't have any wires, so we did that. Repeater offset crystal board. All of these things we put together. I even built a chassis for it. There are thousands of these out there. Maybe some of you have, because I know some of them went to your country. This was amazing times, 10 meters back in the late 70s through the 80s. Oh my, it was really, really something. Worked, I don't know how many countries with that little box right there. And so every once in a while, I'll talk to somebody on the air and they said, hey, man, I'm still enjoying my 10-meter FM. Well, I carried it a little further. I wrote the book, and I was deemed the father of 10-meter FM because it told you how to take any of the CBs. You could do this and all of the drawings and things that it took to do that. And so we also had an interesting thing happen in that Evelyn was the American president of ICOM America. And I was taking some of these to some of the trade shows selling these kits. This is before Heil Sound was in the ham radio business. This is how I got there, because I was doing all the stuff for years with the you know, the Dead and Frampton built the talk box and all these monster sound systems, which is a whole story in itself. But Evelyn said, that's getting pretty popular, isn't it? And I said, yes, it is. So I gave her one of my books. They started putting 10-meter FM in the first transceiver, which was a 735 ICOM. A little bit of history for you that I had a little bit to do with, and I'm very proud of that because FM is a wonderful, wonderful mode along with AM, and so that all happened, and we were thrilled to make it happen. But the 10-meter FM thing is, as you guys know, even 10-meter AM these days is pretty great. Well, now that you've seen all that, what are we going to do? We're going to walk over here, and here's the real deal. I hope you can see some of this, but the power supply did that with a bridge rectifier, by the way, instead of the tube. I had a tube in it at first, but I got a little more power out of that. 12AX7, the equalizer, no problem. And then the final. And the final is, it's really cool. 160 meters, 6AG7, 6V6. And I have 3 crystals and a band switch. So my dummy load is a number 47 light bulb. I have one of MFJ's QRP watt meter. This thing is really, really good on these kind of deals. So I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but let's put it into transmit and see if we can get something to, oh, there you go. 40 meters. What do we see in here? About 4.5 watts. Okay. Now we're going to go to 75. And of course, we'll have to retune it. And the same reading. Anywhere from 4 to 5 watts. And the whole coil, 160 meters. Band switching. There's the relay to switch the receiver. There's a coax connector. You can't see it on this side. That's where you take it to your receiver. So it truly is a working transmitter, and it works really, really good. And I'm very excited about it because a lot of people got turned on to AM. And not only that, but building. Well, as I mentioned, a lot of people, they wanted me to build a final. And so I did. We're just in the realms of getting that going. It works okay. I haven't done all the drawings yet, but that's coming up. I just have to get it. It works. And this is only for 40 and 75. And the bias supply is here, an adjustment of that. This is all diodes, and these are the bypass caps across the diode. Nothing exorbitant. It's just a simple little 807 final. I love 807s. And the reason I love 807s, you can't see it, darn it. Right down there is a Harvey Wells TBS 50. That was my first transmitter. And I don't know. Oh, you can't see the other one either. I got another Harvey Wells T90 over there. And I love all these things. They're just so great. There you go. That's the Harvey Wells T90. And you can just see the top of it down there of the TBS 50. But my first love of all of the AM things that I'm using happens to be my ICO. I love my ICO. ICO has just an incredible transmitter. It's better than just about anything. And, you know, Rangers or any of that. Show you, see if I can, yeah, there we go. Now that ICO 720, it was a CW transmitter. And they built a modulator that's back behind it there. The modulator was a hi-fi amplifier. They, in the day, they came out with that in the late 50s with that 720. And it was really good. But then they were in the hi-fi business, ICO. And so they took one of their hi-fi amp, Williamson feedback circuit. I mean, this was a very, very heavy duty, fantastic modulator. So they took out the old 8 ohm transformer, put in a 5,000 ohm. On the back of the ICO, they brought the B plus lead and the 6146 cap here, and you'd have to have a jumper in it normally. Nope. Plug in the modulator, bingo. It really works. If you ever have a chance to pick up a 720 and a 730, I mean, it outperforms some of the broadcast transmitters. And when I say that, people are, no, I'm serious, because what I do to it, we got to understand, this is a Williamson feedback circuit. And it really has some neat things going on in it. I forgot to do this. And it's something that you're able to make work very easily. But one of the other things about it is they had a VFO, and I loved all of that. But I use it on 75 and 40 just beautifully. That little receiver is a very, very interesting receiver. That's a Mosley CM1. Very rare. That one came from the Mosley plant about 2 months into when they were building it. I was playing the organ across the Lindbergh Avenue near the airport in St. Louis, where Mosley was. I'd go in a little early once in a while and visit Mosley. Marvelous receiver. Is it the best? No, but for AM, wow, it's got such articulate audio, just super audio. Well, I also recently, I found out through a friend of mine that he was not feeling well. So I went down to South Carolina to visit him. And he had just acquired this little guy. What is that? It's a Mars. Yeah, it's a Mars. Have you guys seen any of these? This is one super little deal. Look at that. Now, what's so cool about it is I go searching every once in a while. I found a phone patch and I found their SWR meter. Is that cool or what? This was a mobile rig. And remember I told you about the broadcast engineer retired that turned me on to building on pine board, W0BVT. He was in the Army in 1955, stationed in California, and he had a Mars Thunderbird in his 1956 Ford car. Look at this thing. This is one amazing little transmitter. I just can't believe how clean it was. So usually the copper chassis go crazy, not this one. And underneath, it's really, really done right. Very compact, but it all works. And of course, you can see the tubes are all tightened down, and each one of the little threads, and they're all they're all treated with some white paint so they won't go out of tune. Is that something special? Mars Thunderbird. If you happen to run across one, grab it because they're extremely rare. And I know 3 or 4 of the other guys that have it, and we're all nutty about some of this kind of stuff, you know. And I was doing the years on Ham Nation. I was there for 10 years, and I finally said, I'm going to start doing something different. What was I going to do different? What I'm doing right now. I thought, you know, I could come to clubs and do some things and help them. With Ham Nation, you got about 10 minutes, and that was about it. And this is number 200 and what is it? Yeah, this is number 228, believe it or not, that I've done. Many of these run sometimes 2 hours because I play the theater organ. We talk about Frampton and all the Walsh and all these. Anyway, I got an email one day from a fellow in Ukraine. Now, this goes way back, probably 7, 8 years ago. Sergey, he bought the rights to the little Miko. The Miko. We all built one. We were younger, probably. AC1. Yeah, another little 5-watt transmitter, right? It was a kit. So I put it together as part of one of the couple of the shows. I didn't do too bad job, did I? But then I got out my Greenlee punches. You know, good old Greenlees. I still have mine from my 1956, 57 days of building. And I punched a hole in the back of it. Why did I do that? Because I wanted to put that accessory plug. All that is I broke the B plus going to the final. And I take one of my 730 ICO modulators, plug it in, and then it's on AM. Yeah. That was like really simple to do. I had to have the dummy plug because pins 4 and 6 are, if you don't put that in, if you're not using a modulator, if you don't have it in there, nothing happens. But isn't that a cool little piece? And so there you can put it on AM, and that's what we're all after, I think. Oh, there is so much good stuff. But a lot of this is on our website. A lot of the drawings and stuff is heilsound.com. Our ham radio page, that'll take you there, but the ham radio page will also get you there. Just Heil ham radio, all no spaces, Heil ham radio. But heilsound.com gets it. And that really gives you some beginnings of it because all the diagrams are there. Also in my handbook is a lot. The handbook is really helpful if you've never seen this. It's really, really good. The stuff that I learned through the early days from 1956 on that so many of my mentors helped me with it. And just go to resources at hamradio.com and you got it. heilhamradio.com. And you can search for the Pine Board Project, and that's how you get all the drawings. There's a lot of things. There's probably 50 pages in there. There's also a lot of responses from guys building and so on. So we have had some wonderful things happening to us because of ham radio, and we're still doing it. And I'm always excited for you guys and gals to let me come and spend some time. A few years back, I was very blessed. Heil Sound is the only manufacturer in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, mainly because so many of the things, that mixer you see me standing in front of that's in the Rock Hall, I built that for Pete Townsend. He called me over to his house one day, so I flew over again after one of our tours. He said, I want to do something in quad because it's a big deal. That was 1970. And so what we did is we built quadraphonic console so we could have Roger's voice in 4 different corners of an arena, stuff like that. We were the first people to do monitors only because of phasing. Where did I learn that? Antennas, and just really wonderful things like that. And of course, then the other situation is the talk box. And actually, it was Joe Walsh that I built the first one for. But Peter Frampton, little girlfriend, lived in our hometown, and she called me one day and says, "I'm with Peter now. I need a Christmas present." And so what did I do? I give her one of the talk boxes that we had built. I only built I think we built 5 of them. But here is one of those 5. And Peter signed it for me. But that's kind of like helped his career. And he'll tell you that. I'm very, very honored to know him as a friend. He was a great person to travel with and so on. So that's the story on the Rock Hall. And then a couple of years ago, I was given an honorary PhD here at Missouri University for music and electronics. But we're still out there doing it, and we're always here to help. Does anybody have any questions? Don't be shy. No questions, Tom, the first time.
Well, stay with me. There was apologies. There was a couple of fools messing around at the end, a bit of interference. So it didn't spoil the talk at all. So thank you very much first to Bob. Very enjoyable. Sorry, my voice is going. But there must be some questions from some of you there. But I was really impressed with the pine board build. And you know, we're trying to encourage some building at some point in the society, and there might well be a competition coming up later in the year for some building. So getting the likes of your good self on, Bob, is it a bit of inspiration for some of us who think perhaps we can't do it? Well, perhaps we can. So please, anybody who's got questions.
A comment, really, Bob. I was intrigued to find out about your activities on 10 FM, because I think I was either the first or maybe the second to get active on 10 FM in about 78 over here. There had been a couple of pre-war licensees over in the UK, G8SK and G2CD, who used NBFM way back in the 50s and the 60s, but that was because they had TVI issues. But I was tuning up the top end of 29 megs around about 76 or 77, and I heard some OZ stations in Denmark on 29.6 FM, and that's what started me listening there. And of course, when the cycle came up, you know, I heard the States coming through, and I managed to modify my FT101 by wobbling the clarifier line on transmit and slope detecting through the narrow sideband filter to resolve the signals. And it all took off from there over here. And we had a UK 10 FM group, and it became very popular and died out in the mid 80s because a lot of people didn't bother with the right antennas.
Yeah. Antennas were easy. Just got a hold of some of the really nice CB antennas and chop off a few inches and you're home.
Well, a lot of people were trying to tune up G5 RVs and long wires, and you've got to think VHF with 10 meters. But what are your comments about phase distortion on FM compared to AM?
Well, we're gonna have phase distortion there. That there's really nothing we can do about it. It's just fading, and what really is happening. And I have a whole treatise on this. Need to come back again and talk about some of these other things. When you hear that, a lot of people don't realize what's happening. It's changing polarity. And so I worked with Avante. They were quite a leader in antennas for CB. And one of the guys that ran their company and I were good friends. We met on 10 meter FM. And they built me a prototype of a cubical quad. And it was, I forget the name of it in CB world, but they made one for the CB. They made this one, they cut it down and all that. And then I built a switch box. What I did is I took two of these receivers and I took the AGC lines and to a comparator, and whichever one was stronger would switch the audio. And so I very seldom heard any kind of that because I was doing something about it. And then a lot of guys that I worked with, they didn't do the comparator and all, but they had a switch, or they can switch receiver when that all started. But a lot of people don't realize on anything, I don't care if it's commercial radio, if it's single sideband, oh boy, a lot of fading. Oh boy, power must have went down. No, it's switching polarities. And your signal never stays in the plane that it leaves your transmitter. Never. And I have, once in a while, I get a few guys, they really want to argue about this. I don't argue about anything. I only want to talk about the science. And the science of this particular subject is polarity switching. But yeah, those were all fun days, weren't they?
Yeah, we were working VK6RO every day and VK4ABZ similarly, and I was doing that from the mobile as well, and all over the States. I remember working W6SAI regularly as well. Really good days.
Yeah, it's quite interesting the comments about the polarity, because we were teaching, sorry, my voice, the intermediate licensee, so the middle license over here, and that was we were looking at propagation the other week, and that was one of those things that we were discussing. It's not necessarily in the syllabus, but we went, if I'm teaching, we do tend to go a little bit off into, a little bit further than we need to, but I don't think that hurts to help round their understanding about it. And just because you're using a vertical, because that's all you've got space for in your backyard on HF, as you say, the polarity is changing constantly as it twists and turns through the ionosphere. So it's all good fun. Anyways, anyone else got a question? Because my voice isn't holding up.
Not so much a question. I'd like to say thanks, Bob, for an interesting talk. But what I was going to just say was, with all the controversy there is at the moment about FT8 killing ham radio, I just noticed when I dug out QST to have a look at your original article, that in that very QST there was an article called "Join the FT8 Revolution." So in that one issue of QST, there was a pine board and the dreadful FT8 side by side.
Yeah. Well, is it?
I don't do any of those things, and it's all AM and single sideband. That's it. So I'm an old curmudgeon, I guess. I don't know. It's not the ham radio I grew up with, and I'm 1956. So I've been around 60 some years and enjoyed a lot of different things. But that doesn't say that other people like whatever they want. So that's what makes ham radio so cool.
Right, it's just interesting what's said about FT8 these days. I saw several smiles when I mentioned that. So.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same discussion that happened when single sideband appeared, and that was going to kill amateur rate. There was, whenever there's a new mode, there always seems to be this tends to be popular. I've never used it. I've used PSK 31 as about as far as I got. but I must prefer talking to people than having a computer do it for me. But that's
One of
it's
the
just
things
me, I
that you
suppose. Yeah.
that you could do with your AM group is if they don't want to do a pine board and find the parts and so on, go over to Sergi and buy this little guy. I mean, this is a fun thing. It sells it as a kit, and it works so good. And then plug in the back of it and find a modulator. That's easy to do. I got one guy doing this. He's using a Fender guitar amp as his modulator. And that's what it is. You have to have a transformer for it. You know, the output transformers and amplifiers are 8, 16 ohms thing to match speakers. You need one at like 2,000, 3, 4, 5,000 different taps, whatever. And that's what you need to put in series with your 6146 or whatever final you have. Works great. That's what's going on with the ICO. The other thing I do, which is very interesting, and I get real out of sorts with some of the guys in their audio. They just stick a mic in it and don't worry much about it, and that's really kind of sad. So what I do, I use one of our balance line professional microphones. In fact, I'm using a microphone that Paul Rogers of Pad Company asked me to build him some years ago. He said, I want something that's very articulate. But they all play through a Symmetrix 52080. That, by the way, is, I'll talk about that in a minute. That has everything in it. Every AM radio station in the world has some of these. It's got processing of all kinds. And so I don't use any of that. All I use are 9 controls, 3 bands of parametric equalization. And man, you can just make things come alive. 2.5K is the magic spot. And get that articulation up. And we even have that built into some of our microphones, most all of them actually, a little rise at 2.5K. But Symmetrix makes a really great product. And you have to think about equalization. And once you do, why things really come alive. But any of these little kits will work great. Just got to build you a modulator.
So, Bob, what's the bandwidth of those transmitters that you've got there? I mean, if I look at my KW Vanguard, my old boat anchor, and compare it and look on the screen of my 7300, the Vanguard is wide as hell, yet the frequency response isn't, you know, any better than the 7300.
All of these were running about right at 5 to 6K. The different pine boards that I've heard of the guys build.
Which is pretty good. Have we got any questions from anybody else? Because we were lucky to get Bob on, although we did think we'd double booked earlier this week. And thought, oh no, I haven't got a speaker, but it was. I think Bob had written us down as another club, so that was very lucky. Any comments from anyone else? There's been 1 or 2 that have had to drop out early, who've asked me to express their thank you to Bob for taking the time in the middle of the day over there. And there's several that have sent apologies they couldn't make it, but could I record it? So I'm very grateful for Bob for coming along and allowing us to record it. So is there any final questions before we wrap up?
If no one's got another one, I'll have another crack. Because this is interesting. Bob, the 7300, you mentioned that they're very good on AM, which I would agree, as is my K3. The reports that I get when I run either of those rigs compared to my tube rig is that the audio sounds louder on the tube rig than it does on either of the solid state radios. And I've looked at it on a scope and I'm getting the same modulation depth. Have you got any comments on that? Because I can't see that there should be any logical difference. If you're modulating 100%, it should be the same regardless of whether you're low level modulating or high level.
True. What kind of microphone are you using with the tube rigs, the valves?
It's
T1F4, something like that?
no, it's an old mobile microphone from a public mobile radio, but I've used that on other rigs as well. I've got a condenser microphone on the K3 and the hand microphone on the 7300.
Well, you'll discover that the microphone you're using with your tube rigs, that microphone probably has a peak in that 2 to 3K. I would bet money on it, because in those days, they knew that was golden. They knew that. And when you get into with the 7300 or anything, how are you equalizing it?
Well, I'm not equalizing it at all.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew that was coming. Damn, I knew that was coming. I knew it. Simon, you have to have me back.
Oh,
And we're going
please.
to get into this whole situation of how our ears work, how 4,000 scientists at Bell Labs figured out how they work, and what kind of, we definitely don't want things flat. Oh, it's going to be flat. No, we're not listening to hi-fi records. We're talking about articulation, and that only happens, the human voice trying to bring speech across the airwaves. 2.5K. I preach it till and a lot of people don't know this, and it drives me nuts. Where in the heck are we? Where's the ARRL? Where's the RSGB? Why are they not helping us? They don't write anything. They won't even let us do anything. Oh, that's just kind of your own opinion. Well, I'll tell you what. No, there's a lot to it. And I was so blessed that Paul Klipsch, he's the father of the hi-fi movement. He's the father of the folded horn. Paul Klipsch was an amazing man. He called me one day in 1972. He wanted to come and see a 6,000 watt PA that we had out with the Who, because he was an efficiency freak. But it was true. Some of my stuff they were anywhere from 4 to 8, 10,000 watts, depending on the home. But he turned me on to something that everybody should know about. Let me grab this. First of all, he gave me a gift. It never is more than a few feet from me, and I'm working on things. It's called the Audio Cyclopedia. It's 1,750 pages about audio. You want to argue with this? Okay, you can. But let me tell you where a lot of it came from. It comes from the telephone system. When they first put the telephone system together, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? 2 wires from New Jersey to California. Every 500 miles, they kept the voltage up. Everything was up. Frequency was like flat. Yeah. When they got out there, this is what they heard. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't what we put in. So now what are we going to do? Well, what we had to do, Bell Labs stepped in, all 4,000 of them. There were 4,000 scientists on this project, and they had to find out what happened. And the 2 lead guys trying to figure out what's wrong with this for a hi-fi record, maybe. These 2 guys, and I sure hope that you know about Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson. Oh my, this should be the second question in your ham radio license, because they found out our ears do not hear flat, and it varies with the level. That's why kids want to hear music real loud. Look at the top. It's almost flat. down here where you're listening right now, 20, 30 dB level. Look at it. Looks like a ride at Disneyland. Well, these wonderful people figured it out. That is what you want coming out of your transmitter. And if you don't have it, then you're going to get chewed up by those that do. And so we build microphones to help that. And I'm constantly helping guys get equalization together. I was the guy that I built the very first one. And this was quite a piece of history. I built this for me, but got on 40 meters when I finally got my extra class license. Everybody was coming to me for this. What is it? It's 160 hertz plus or minus 12 dB or 2.5K plus or minus. And it really was a big deal in those days. I got a letter from Dr. Inouye, founder, president of ICOM. He sent me a picture. The picture was of his microphone was one of my gold lines, and he had one of my equalizers. I couldn't believe it. I mean, whoa, I'm thinking of new transmitter, and I want to use your EQ200. So history remains from the Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, all the way through the lineup, 7600, 7610, the great 7851, the little 705. They all have my equalizer. But then I had to help them because they didn't have very good nomenclature, no drawing, nothing in their manuals. They don't really get into it. So that's where I really got into it. We have pages and pages on our websites about how to set your radio, the DSP. 2 years later, Dr. Hasegawa, his family owned Yaesu, came to me at Dayton. He come in my booth, great big Japanese guy. I want to talk to you. What are we talking about? Oh, that EQ stuff. Let's step out of the booth. So we stepped out of the booth and started talking. He said, I want to do it better. I said, well, the only way you're going to do it better is with the parametric EQ. Well, why not? Let's do it. Well, now, wait a minute. There's a problem. What's the problem? The problem is you don't have two controls, and I set the frequencies that ICOM put in this. All you can do is plus or minus those. Well, with a parametric equalizer, you have 9 buttons, 9, and you don't know where any of them are. They're not preset. So it really, it destroys me when I hear guys on the air with a Yaesu in the default mode. They have the most incredible piece of ham radio, and they haven't turned it on. Why? Because they have not had any education. And our website's full of it. How to set your Yaesu, and do it easily, and why, and so on. All the settings are there. Here's a reader. That's where it is right there. Set that one at 200, notch it out, minus 2 or 3, get rid of that low end a little bit, not all of it. And then something really weird that happens around 800 to 1000. It's a real boxy sound. And so you're going to set that about 900 and notch that down. But where is the last one? Of course it is 2500, 2.5K plus 8. And you're going to say, well, why did you do that much? Because if I didn't have that, that's what you'd be listening to. All I did was take 2.5 out. You like that? No, you don't, because it's hard to understand what I'm saying. So let's bring 2.5 back. And the minute I hit 2.5, it's like, wow, it's got some sizzle to it. I don't hear about this anywhere else. And so we started building microphones. This is the microphone for the Yaesu, Kenwood, Elecraft. Nothing touches it. And then ICOM, they asked me to build them a mic. None of these companies build their own microphones. That freaks a lot of guys. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about, Heil. Well, working for them, I know a little more than you would think. I've been in their plants and so on. They don't build their microphones. They paint them the same color, put their name on them. You've been fooled for years. It's a true story. That only works on an ICOM. Wait a minute, that's the PR22. I wanted to bring up the other one. That one I built for Paul Rogers, and I use that on your Kenwood, on your Yaesus. Also, it's really good because it has a rise at 2.5K, and it just boggles my mind that I never can get anybody to understand why. Yeah, this is what we build for ICOM. It won't work on a Kenwood. It won't work on a Yaesu. It won't work on anything but ICOM. Comes with its own cable, has our own cable, our own wire. If you don't know about Heil wire, you need to find out. It's the only cable for microphones because the shields are right on it, and it outperforms anything that I've heard on an ICOM. But people get, I don't know, they get attached to something, and that's all they know, and it's really sad. They need to look around a little bit. You know, I really got into so many different things when I first got back into real-time radio, and a lot of it had to do with just experimenting. I love to experiment, and it even gets down into the wire. And what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that all 100% of the wire cable is an RF generator. What do you mean? I've solved more RFI problems just by changing to our cable. Well, what's so big deal about that? It's a big deal because I learned years ago what the problem was. And the problem is all of the cable that comes with your, there we go, all of the cable that comes with your matching microphone has everything inside a shield, and it's a real crappy shield. You start pulling it apart and you end up with one or two little leads. Check this out. It's done right. 100% silver shield, and it's an absolute braid, and it solders so beautifully. But the wire's not 24 gauge, it's 18 gauge. And there's not just one, there's two inside. Why? Because all of the microphones that we use should be balanced line. Another day for another great big awakening. So we need balanced line inside the shield. But all other microphones, what else they do? They put the push to talk in there. Are you crazy? Push to talk has DC on it. And so you're going to put that right up against that real sensitive AC line, and you're going to tell me that that's okay? No, it's not okay. And I fixed it. We saw thousands of feet of wire, broadcast stations, and all kinds of people that they get it. And when you get it, you'll see what I mean. It's just beautiful stuff. It's very flexible and so on. But anyway, those are just a few things that need to really get into sometime. And
I kind of get the feeling that we could have Bob talk to us until the early hours here, and well, perhaps
listen, I've taken more time from you. I probably should.
No. It's been great, and perhaps
I hope that
if you're in agreement, Bob, we might get in touch and maybe ask you to come back later in the year, perhaps.
Anytime. Really. Just send me some dates and I'll be there.
You know, because a couple of the guys, we've had a few drop in and out with work and family commitments, which is why we record them. And Stuart was late, for instance, but it will be up there on the YouTube channel for everybody in a day or two. And I'm sure there'll be lots of other people that will have other things they'd like to hear you talk about, because the enthusiasm. You're across the pond, but I can feel the enthusiasm through my laptop. And that's what we like. We like speakers with enthusiasm. So if we're going to wrap it up in a minute, because I've got a dash, but you guys can carry on having a natter if you like. But can we all just sort of thumbs up or something to Bob, because it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Bob.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Very
We'll
good.
come back and make things happen and all that. Thanks for the time today.
No, we really appreciate it. And there he is with his doctorate, his honorary doctorate, which is great. If any of you guys want to carry on nattering, I will leave the room in a second, but because the voice is just giving up. So, but it's great to see you all. Thank you to Bob. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And we'll see you again.